What's up guys, it's Tusk here, and today I'm going to be talking about a game that I've been playing far too much, and that is Age of Wonders 4. I have played so much of this game. I've done pretty much every strategy there is, and if you want to see more of this after this video, then just let me know. I will be going into the Crusader Kings expansion when I have time to do it, but as of right now all I've been doing is playing, all the games I've been playing is this game at the moment. It's been extremely fun. So I thought I would give a rundown on the game itself and how to introduce someone to it, and how it, in some sense it's a turn-based strategy game, so it's not like Crusader Kings in a sense where there is real time to it. Although in a sense Crusader Kings is kind of turn-based if you include it by monthly, but there is real-time combat in Crusader Kings, so not really the same thing in that sense at all. Much more similar to something like Civilization. But the main thing about this game is the creative aspects of it are unreal. Like, I've never seen like a mixture of grand strategy and RPG elements like this game has put together. So we'll jump into a new game here, and you can see that there's a bunch of realm types. You have to unlock a bunch of these for the Pantheon, which is basically you just play and you get points based on how well you do, etc. And if you lose, you still get points based on what you've done. Don't be afraid about losing. Learning is a part of the experience as well. But here we're just going to pick one of the scenarios. This is the story mode. This will actually go for the story, and the cinematics are unreal, by the way, unbelievably impressive, typical of Paradox, I guess. Yeah, so I'm going to just click on the easiest one at the moment, and we're going to talk about we'll talk about the world, I think, in a different video if you want to see that. But basically this just sets up a realm. Think about if any of you have ever played Civilization, you can set certain aspects to it. Like here you can put like a barren oceans, coast, islands, etc. What the world's going to generate like. But every world is random as far as I know. Well, maybe with certain parameters in it based on what you pick here. But yeah, we'll go into this more depth in a different video if that's what you want. So for now, I think I'm just going to click next, and this is all of the societies you can play as, and there's so many options that you have the choice here for. But I think the main thing they've went for is aesthetics. They've already announced a bunch of DLCs that they might be creating. There's like a Dragon Lord DLC coming soon, which looks pretty cool. But yeah, so you can see I've made a bunch of them. Just for fun mostly, but yeah, it's pretty interesting to see. But yeah, we're going to just jump in and create a faction here. This is your aesthetic appearance, so you don't actually, none of this actually matters. You can pick any one of these and then just change the body and mind traits. With my experience so far, I think I've got a pretty good gathering of what's good and what's not in terms of the body and mind traits. But mostly the main thing is aesthetics for this customization thing, because these body and mind traits really don't play that much into the game. The main ones here, I would say, is resistant is very strong, because there isn't much magic resist in the game, and a lot of magic damage in the game as well. Later on, as a lot of the higher tier units have hybrid damage. And it's much easier to get armor in the game, since you can just use shield units. Now there is support units, but you don't really want to put your support units up at the front in case they get hit. They're almost always, I think they actually always are, ranged units, or except from heroes in the game. But yeah, basically think of it this way: they're like minor little things. 10% damage, you know, nice at the start, not that big of a deal. The main ones I think are quick reflexes. I think is insane. This basically gives you a 30% chance of not being hit, which is just nuts when I think about it. Like, if you put quick reflexes, there's an item in the game, a ring that gives you your hero 60% less chance of being hit, so all of a sudden 90% from this. And there's also a body item, but you probably don't want to put that in a slot. But you could also end up taking something like Hardy, plus 10 hit points. It's always good, especially if you're using low tier units. This can be as much as like 20% more health, which is substantial. But yeah, the coolest thing out of all of these is definitely the mount traits. So if I was to click, say, spider mounts here, and then click select, you can see now my toad people have spider mounts in the background, which is pretty cool. But anyway, now we're on to the cultural aspect of the game. So basically, this is how your society functions, and they all have unique aspects. So feudals, or as feudal society, think Crusader Kings, substantial. What a surprise. Then we have the high culture. These are like elves. I think Lord of the Rings probably is probably the most biggest and most realistic scenario to these. These are basically, they've picked something, they strive at that, whatever that ideal is, and they are the pinnacle of that ideal. So you can have an alignment agenda and become pure evil or pure good. Becoming pure evil is actually very difficult, and you have to maintain it by constantly being at war, so it can be quite difficult. Being pure good, though, it can actually be quite easy. You just have to give up advantages in certain scenarios that happen. And then staying neutral is very easy. It's not hard to stay neutral as long as you're not at war permanently. Then you might be getting towards more very evil sort of side. Barbarian, very aggressive. They're basically very good in the early game, I find, because their scouts can make outposts, which is basically like settlers in Civilization, if you think, or something along those lines. Industrious is basically production. Very, very tanky units. Dwarves is what they're meant to signify, I think. And they have this special ability, which is actually kind of nuts. But I'll talk about that in a different video. It basically allows you to get resources from mountains, which is quite substantial. Unlike in Civ, where you can't pass mountains, in this game you can actually walk over them just at a very heavy movement cost. Then we have Dark, which is just one of the coolest. They're automatically somewhat evil. They start off as being evil at -10, and then they have the Call the Weak thing, basically weakening and reducing the damage and debuffing the opponent. And they have a knowledge bonus, which is really good. It's like having either high learning as in Crusader Kings or high science in Civilization. And then Mystic is very interesting because what's unique about this game is that it is a fantasy game. So its system is based on magic, not on technology. Basically, Mystic has knowledge advantages, so it's like having high science. But imagine there's a pinch on the side where everyone here, all of these cultures, rely on magic being useful to some degree. But the Mystic culture's main advantage is that all their units do magic damage pretty much, and it's split magic damage, which I'll talk about in a different video, but if you want me to. But the main thing here is that they usually have infinite mana, so they could just keep casting spells and more spells and more spells because they get mana so easily from Astra Echoes, and all of their buildings have extra mana income.
What defines
this is the society traits in the game. Basically, they all have specific affinities, which I will go over after I've probably went over the general analysis of what these do. These are decent advantages, but they're not like absolutely game breaking. Some of them are stronger than others, don't get me wrong. Like Prolific Swarmers, for example, literally makes all of your units 20% cheaper. That's a pretty big deal, especially since it's the whole game. The -10% food isn't actually that substantial because I find that population in this game, unlike in Civ, is actually quite weak. The population doesn't matter that much, except at the start of the game, maybe the first like 5 pops. The main thing in this game is buildings, cities, and stacking up knowledge and having strategic positions where you can defend those cities and either go for a magic victory, which I can talk about in a different video again. Game is a bit complex, probably not as complex as like Stellaris or something along those lines, but basically there's a lot of stuff in the game that can be talked about when it comes to strategy. But the main thing here is we have basically your order traits, which is this affinity, the order affinity. And you can see it gives a minor bonus to your governor, which your governor will rule a specific city. And for order, it's gold. And you can see both Chosen Uniters and Devotees of Good automatically give you +10 alignment. So the main thing about Devotees of Good here, for example, just to pick it out as to show why it's actually a very good trait, I think, is because if we see here, this is Imperium. Imperium in the game is used to found cities, certain unique decisions, and it's a very rare resource that you can't really get other than upgrading your wizard tower. You start with 40 Imperium, and it's very unlikely you're going to get to double that unless you take this trait. So it can be quite a hard resource to come by. So I would usually suggest going either Devotees of Evil or Devotees of Good or Scions of Evil. Very powerful traits purely because of this 5 Imperium you can get, and it's kind of like this version's game of how do I put it? It's not the science tree, because the science tree is magic in this game. I think it's more like the cultural tree in Civ, probably the best way to put it. Like Empire Development is what it's called. So basically, order here. Then we have chaos, of course, opposing each other. And also something to note is that if an other AI has chaos affinity and you have order, say you had pure order, no other splashes of any other affinities in, and someone else has chaos, yous will hate each other or have a very high likelihood of not getting on well. Chaos is all about war, pillaging, etc. And then we have the Astral. This is all about magic. You can see here we get Ancient Wise Ones. It's kind of neat. It's not as powerful as it looks. Basically, every tome you unlock, you get minus 60% knowledge. Although I will admit, tomes are, unless you're going to rush through a bunch of tier 2 and tier 3 tomes, this is not as powerful as it seems. Or if you're going to rush straight to tier 5 tomes, this can be very powerful. But yeah, either way, it's decently strong. But the others are all about casting. You can see Gifted Casters makes your combat spells cheaper and gives you more points so you can cast more spells. And then Mana Channelers makes your summoning spells cheaper and gives your units rank. Rank in this game is actually very impactful. It can give your units more HP and more damage, etc., depending on what the unit is. Then we have Mana Addicts here. Oh, I forgot to mention actually, these little symbols here is a Pantheon symbol. And it basically means that they have to be unlocked through the Pantheon. So you have to, these specific traits here, you have to unlock them through the Pantheon by playing the game, basically. So magic, think, I find that nature is very good. The reason we can't take Fabled Hunter here is because we don't have so if we go back to Mystic and go to Feudal, let's say, and then we scroll down, we can take that because we now have an Archer. Then we have like Materium. Materium is like runesmiths. Basically, it's an amazing trait, by the way. One of my favorites for sure. Materium is very economy based and basically works around production, gold, and having a large army. And then we have Shadow, and it's basically about spying. You can see here Signs of Evil is about being evil. And then Powerful Evokers is actually a very nice ability, not only because it gives you a battle mage at the start or a support unit, which is very good for Feudal, but also it gives you combat casting points, which is very nice. And here is the tomes. You can see you get 2 tomes per each affinity. You can see here's Materium, Nature, Order, Shadow, and then back to Astral. And here is what's called the Ruler's Origin or Gaudier type. I think generally speaking a champion is better overall for your empire. It just gives some nice buffs, but it doesn't make your champion any more powerful than what they are. But all heroes in the game, and your ruler is considered a hero, have very powerful abilities on their own anyway. The main thing that makes a Wizard King very powerful is it's nice having these combat casting points, but you will rack them up anyway throughout the game. It's more in the early game that this is very useful, because once you get to level 3, 4, 5, you're going to be ahead of what a champion would be and be able to cast more spells in combat. But the main thing is this Overchannel ability, which pretty much lets you cast 2 spells in one turn once per combat. But there's a thing in the Empire Development tree, as long as you have some Astral points, that lets you cast spells in the first turn. But if you're a Wizard King, you get to cast them twice. So you get to basically use Overchannel twice. So in the first 2 turns, you can cast 4 spells, which can really get out of hand and get kind of crazy. But for here, we're going to choose a champion as our little toad people. It actually doesn't look too bad. But I think we're going to go for... yeah, there we go. But here's the customization. This is... everything here is basically just aesthetic. You can make changes. We can build a new helmet if you want. We have our little toad with a crown on. It actually looks not bad. We have a little... we have a little... I don't even know what that is. What would you call it? A circlet? Here's a how does he even see, man? What? That's a hell of a big crown. But yeah. But what's interesting in this game is you can also make them absolutely tiny. Look. Or we can make them massive and then really buff. Make it buff toads. You can customize their cape. You can customize like a bunch of different stuff basically. But the main thing here is that we have one thing that affects our stats, and that is the weapon we choose to bring. Pretty much what this gives is it gives an ability. So this vigor gives us vigor for free, so we get +10 and we get a mount. A mount is very good if you're going to send your hero out on your own, or if you're going to start off the game by building just scouts, because you want someone to match your movement speed. So if I have 48 movement speed because of my mount, but all of my troops are archers, they're not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to use my movement speed. We'll have to go at the slowest unit's pace. That's how this game functions. I genuinely find, so there's actually a little trick you can do. If you have the body trait mounts, you can quite literally just pick something without a mount, and then you'll get a mount anyway of whatever you picked. So if I was to pick, say, the Tyrant's Sword and Shield here, which is unlocked through the Pantheon, we get the Intimidation aura, but it says we have no mount, but we actually do get one. We just have to equip it at the start of the game. My favorite to probably go, though, is the Berserker's Great Axe, because we get the Berserker's Rage, which gives us steadfast, which basically means we can't go below 1 hit point the moment we hit 33% or lower. So we can just throw ourselves into combat, go with this. We then become Berserk, which is fine, but then we can end up healing our unit, or we can make them invulnerable with the Tome of Warding. I usually go with this tome quite often because it makes, you can make any unit in the game for quite cheap. It's quite a cheap spell. Become invulnerable for 1 turn, but you can only do it on the unit once per combat. This here allows you to customize your race, so we can make our race nice and small. We can change their skin color. Let's go for some pink toads, I guess. But yeah, this is basically just customization. Maybe we should give ourselves some gold. Yeah, look at that. Looks like a champ now. And then here it's just customizing. You can customize your title. You can give your first and last name. We can give what our race names are. Let's go with Victor Quintus of the Mucus Constructors. Sounds lit. So this is basically the customization aspect of the game. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in any other game. Crusader Kings is a customization they added eventually after the first 3 months. It was very nice to have as well. And that's kind of what it feels like in a sense. But it's even more in depth because you get to customize your race. And there's race traits in the game. There's enchantments that you can add. There's obviously and then you get to level up your heroes up to level 20. And then there's so much roleplay aspect to the game, kind of like Crusader Kings in that sense as well. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been playing so far. So if you want to see more, let me know. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.